Hi everyone, welcome back to SmugMug Live. This is episode 109, streamed live on Friday, October the 8th, 2021. Very excited today. We've got a real fun show coming in just a moment, but as always, SmugMug Live is brought to you by SmugMug and Flickr. If you're looking for somewhere to showcase your images to the world, have an incredible photo website, cloud storage for all your images, and have a wonderful e-commerce solution. And please check out everything we do at smugmug.com. If you want to be part of an incredible photo community where you can share your passion for photography with so many incredible communities and people online, go sign up at flickr.com and have a lot of fun over there. I am really thrilled today because this is a live photo critique show. This is on the back of a live critique show I did a few months ago with our friends over at Fujifilm, and it was such a success. Many of you asked for us to do another photo critique show, and I thought, what better way to do it than with some of my friends and some of the wonderful people who already use Flickr to do a live photo critique show. So I asked some dear friends of mine to join me today, and I'm delighted to have Steve and Don join me today for this live critique. I know there are many people in the chat there already, some of them regular viewers for not only myself on SmugMug Live, but for Steve at Behind the Shot and for Don at Photo Geek Weekly. So thank you all for joining us so much and sticking with us while we got the sound working there. Steve, tell us a little bit about Behind the Shot.
Okay, so Behind the Shot is actually a couple of different things. So there is a main Behind the Shot podcast, and on Behind the Shot, the way I try and describe it to people, and it's not always understood, but think about interviewing a photograph. If you could look at a photograph and interview a photograph to better understand the choices the photographer made, to better understand how that photographer thinks and works. And that's really what the Behind the Shot podcast is. We get one photographer on with one photograph, and we dissect that photograph. We do a little bit of an interview at the start. And in fact, just yesterday, I released an episode I'm super excited about with the legendary photographer, Pulitzer Prize winner, David Hume Kennerly. And that came out, like I say, yesterday. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, in either audio only, or if your podcast destination or distributor app, whatever, supports video, it's available in video too. The video is also on the Behind the Shot YouTube channel, so you can subscribe and watch in a number of different places. Then we have these critique shows, which I do every month with my buddy Don Komarechka, and each month we have a third guest panelist, and I'm thinking of today as Alastair is the guest panelist, even though he's running everything.
It's funny. I have had the pleasure of being a guest on the show, and I think we've all been on each other's shows individually, so it's about time we joined both the streams to do this live. So thanks for that insight there, Steve. Don, tell us a little bit about Photo Geek Weekly.
Well, it is a weekly podcast, as often as I can make it weekly, where basically the photo industry has a lot of geeky news that comes through on a regular basis, and I pluck out the geekiest stories and we discuss. Steve is often a guest host. You have been as well, Alastair, and it's running time for an hour of just kind of getting under the hood about what makes the latest cameras tick, or what the latest ethical quandary is, and sometimes it's going to be about legal stuff. Sometimes it's what you should do or shouldn't do, best business practices, copyright, the latest processing of raw files and software. We are actually recording another episode of it following this. It's not going to be live, but Steve and I are going to sit down and even talk about the new stereoscopic 180-degree fisheye lens that Canon came out. That's in the rundown. So if you like to geek out about anything photographic, listen in to Photo Geek Weekly.
And Steve and I will testify that Don is probably the biggest photo geek that we know in this industry, right?
We were talking yesterday when Alastair and I were picking images for this, and I said, yeah, I'm going to be on Photo Geek Weekly again tomorrow. I've got research to do tonight. Because if I go on Don's show without not just reading the stories, but really thinking in my head and watching every video there is posted in a story, I sound like an idiot. compared to Don on the show. So I have to research to death to be on the show.
Yeah. And I said to you yesterday, I guarantee Don's going to mention the new Canon stereoscopic lens. So there you go.
You guys know me well.
We know you really
Yeah.
well. So
And the new Panasonic box camera.
Oh yeah.
So tune in for that. We'll talk a little bit more later on in the show. I'd like to point out that the main reason that I reached out to Steve to join forces today is because with Behind the Shot Critique Show, he does use Flickr as the foundation of curating those images that are going to be part of the critique. So it was just this really nice synergy of, you know, having both our channels together based on this foundation of doing a live photo critique, but also using our own product with your group to get all those images together. I'm delighted. There's now over 1,000 members in your group, Steve, which is awesome, and over 4,000 images.
That is in huge part. That is in huge part to SmugMug and Flickr sending out an email, and we over doubled the members and got a huge. We only picked 9 images, but we got a huge submission of images. And I will say, when I first came up with the idea of doing these critique shows, and I went to Don and we were discussing, you know, how are we going to get images to critique? I think it was Don who first said, we should use Flickr because pictures look, I don't mean to do a commercial. That's not my intent here.
Oh, feel free.
I'm explaining why we, yeah, but really, honestly, I'm just explaining why we use it. I think Don was the one who said to me, you know, Flickr still shows pictures better online than any other source that compresses them to death. And we've been super happy with exactly that. People can see pictures that look really good.
Yeah, and I'm just delighted that people took the effort to post in the group for us to pick images today. It's quite an honor, right, to be allowed to critique someone's images and for people to you know, step up and give us permission to do that. It's quite a thing, Steve.
Well, and I think every one of us here can testify to the fact that it can be really nerve-wracking when you first start doing it. But I believe one of the best ways for you to improve your photography the quickest is to get an idea of what other people think of your images, right? When I used to do image competitions, there were times I would sit in the back of the room as judges were commenting on my images and, in all honesty, ripping them apart. And I would be in my head going, oh, you don't understand what I photograph. You don't understand my art. But inevitably, there was always one comment or one moment where I would sit back and go, wait, you saw that in my photo? I never thought anybody would see that in my photo. And if nothing happens but that, then this is definitely a win. And I will add one other thing, and that is I believe those of you that are just trying to find if your shot was critiqued, I learn more from critiques of genres other than live music, which is what I photograph, than I do live music. I'm pretty settled in my style of live music and how I process and everything. But when I hear, you know, somebody talk about layers or foreground subjects, or I learn a ton from the critiques of other people's shots.
And Don, this is something you've been doing for a while as well. You really enjoy the process of critiquing images.
Well, it's not just that I enjoy it; I get a lot from it as well. You know, and I think that every photographer should make this as an experiment. If you're a part of this community, if you're watching this, go into the Flickr group and write some critiques. Be as verbose as you want, because I think that that's a really good learning process when you analyze images on your own. And I think that you're your own worst critic, in the sense that you can't really honestly critique your own work, because you've got a very biased opinion of things that you do photograph, but you can critique other people's images, and eventually that trickles down to your own work and the decision-making process that you yourself have. And so critiquing from all directions is a valuable exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And the wonderful thing...
One of the things,
sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things I agree with Don, because one of the things with critiquing your own work is you cannot remove the fact from your brain that you were there. You heard the live band, you saw the home run. That inevitably will color what you see. And third-party critiques from people that you trust, right? Third-party critiques that are not just, hey, love this, hey, nice shot. Third-party, kind, generous, constructive criticism solves that problem right there. And one of the things I do, by the way, on the show that a lot of people like is for each guest I have on the normal podcast, I take the photograph, and for the people on the audio feed that can't see the photo, I verbally describe the photo. Oh my gosh, the stuff I have learned about photography from taking a photo on my own and trying to out loud describe it is huge.
Yeah, that's good. A little comment here from Gary says, ditto to what Steve said, even if you don't agree with the person's opinion, it makes you think, and thinking is usually good. Gary, thanks for that comment. A great fan of all our shows. Thanks for being here, Gary. And thank you to everybody who's participating in the chat window today. There's just a lot going on there, so I will keep an eye on that, but feel free to chat amongst yourself. Don, you mentioned about...
James is around the corner from me, actually. James
Canyon
is
Lake,
probably 20 minutes from me. Yeah, in Canyon Lake. By the way, I want to mention the goal here, for those of you that have never seen our critique shows, obviously Alastair has done them before too. The goal is to elevate your photography to the next level. It's not to be mean. It's that outside opinion. And if you have not read Scott Kelby's blog post on what to expect from a photo critique, it's on scottkelby.com. Highly recommended. It's a great read for anybody that thinks about putting their images into a critique.
Yeah. Indeed. But we can continue the critique even after the live show, as Don said, in Flickr itself. There's you can comment on individual photographs, but within the group that you have there, Steve, people can obviously create discussions. So you can have discussions around images and really keep that engagement, keep that conversation going within the group there on Flickr. So if you would love to do that, I'm sure it would be a great asset to what we're doing at the moment. The other thing I wanted to point out is, thousands of images uploaded to that group. We could only pick 9 just for the length of the show, otherwise we'd be here forever. It's disappointing that we only get to pick 9, but you will learn something from seeing other people's images critiqued. And Steve, you're quite focused on, it's not about just picking the 9 best images, right?
Right. No, again, picking images last night was really hard. Partially because as I'm looking for images that I think will benefit everybody, right? I'm looking for images that I think, touch on different genres. I want a street photography. I maybe want something that's portraiture. I want something that's landscape, that type of thing. So everybody gets hit. All genres get hit. But as I'm going through looking for images I think will be a good learning moment, I keep saying to Alastair, oh, you got to see this one. Oh, here. Oh, check this out. Not because it's critiquable, just because there's some killer shots in the group right now.
Yeah, we did go down a few rabbit holes picking his images where we found some stuff that we just could not believe was so incredible. So apologies again that we couldn't pick everybody, but I guess we should get started because we have a lot of great images to showcase today. Shall I get started, gentlemen? Are we sitting comfortably?
Let's please do it.
Well, our first image...
I think you're the guest. You go first.
Yeah, I'm the guest. You're the guest. Don's the guest. We're all guests. Everybody watching is the guest. It's good stuff. Right, I'm going to start the critique. I will start with the first image, which is called Sunset Drama. Beautiful image, which, when you're looking through thousands of images, you are looking for images that are going to kind of stand out and make you think and make you want to talk about them. This image, for me, was something I wanted to really investigate and look at. I was attracted, of course, by this incredible dramatic sky. Really intriguing the way the darkest elements of the photograph kind of envelope the main part of the photograph, which is obviously the horse, but silhouetted behind this incredible, I'm assuming, sunset. Just incredible colors in that sky. The sky itself would have been an interesting subject, but add in this dimension of the animal on this little bluff. It really, really was intriguing to me. There's so much I loved about the exposure of the sky. I love the fact you can see detail in the foreground. It almost looks like a kind of sand dune. It looks like kind of sand between the grasses there. I loved how the grasses kind of stuck up at the top of the hill a little bit like the mane. So there was that kind of mirroring of the mane sticking up and the grass. The fact that there was that little bit of detail in the sand dune, I'll call it, the hill, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more detail in the horse itself. I know it's a silhouette, but even in silhouettes, you can add that little bit of detail. I think especially for me, I would have liked to have seen a little bit of detail in the head. I would have loved to have seen just a touch of the eye, just the glimpse of maybe just the faintest detail of the eye would have really helped me understand what the kind of the horse was doing there. The other things that personally for me I could have perhaps wished to have seen better is all the limbs are very, very straight. I would love to have seen a few seconds either side of, walking to that point or moving off from that point, just where there was maybe a little bit of motion in the leg, a little break in the knees of the legs, just to give a little bit more shape to the horse. And of course, it's kind of bang in the center. I think I would have loved to have framed it just a little bit more to the left to give the horse a little bit more room to move into. But man, I love to look at this. I just think the combinations of the colors and the kind of power of that horse on that little ridge of the dune there, just really loved it. Steve, over to you.
So this image, the first time I saw this image has feeling to it. Like I can almost feel like I'm standing there and can sense the horse shaking its head, with the mane kind of moving up and down. The colors are nice. The palette, it's comfortable. The silhouette feels, kind of, for lack of a better phrase, friendly. But I'm going to echo a lot of what Alastair said. First of all, I'm going to start with the composition. I wish the horse was not dead center. If it was left, it would have what's generally referred to as nose room, right? Room to walk into, room to look into, things like that. The ground is about the lower third, but I think there is still too much sky. I don't need, like when the clouds stop and start to get a little wisty near the top, I'd pull this down an inch or so. I just think that it would be a little more vast and give me the feeling that this horse is in the wilderness. The silhouette, I do agree, is too dark. For me, it's not the eyes, though. For me, I'm used to seeing, the bend of the legs, the hip, where it kind of indents to the stomach area of the horse. I'd like to see a little detail to take the horse from what is effectively a 2D silhouette, just enough to be a 3-dimensional silhouette. By the way, there is a small black dot behind the horse. I would clean that up. Other than that, I agree with what everybody said, or what at least Alastair and some people in the chat said, that the grass kind of mimicking the mane, the sand down below. And one thing I'll add also is the timing you shot this with and the way you exposed this, the bright sky almost works as another layer of its own compared to the rest of the sky, doing a backdrop for the horse, which is really nice placement.
Wonderful. Thanks, Steve. Don?
Yeah, so I can echo everything that you folks said, and I largely agree. Now, I looked at the settings, because, of course, Flickr displays EXIF data so beautifully for us. It was shot at ISO 2000 and 1/2000th of a second. So in that sense, I'm thinking that this is a wild horse. It says so in the description, that the photographer was waiting for some action. They wanted some movement or something maybe a little bit more dynamic, but the horse is just walking along. So there's really not a whole lot that you can do. If that was the best shot of the day, you're not going to spook a wild horse in order to get a photograph. I completely understand that. But just looking at the way the camera was set up, there was the anticipation for something that could have been a little bit more there. Because you've got some detail, especially on the patch on the horse's face, as well as in the sand, while the scene is entirely being backlit by the sun, I get the impression that this image was originally at a much higher exposure, and you were able to bring that down and still have detail in the sand, which would have been easier than the other way around. Trying to pull detail out of deep shadows would have been pretty difficult in this scenario. And if that's the case, then your comments, both of you, about the horse being a little bit brighter can be accomplished by reprocessing the image, because that means there would be extra data there to play with, especially a little glint in the eye, I think would be a nice add. I think that's pretty well all I've got. It also, if this image is going to be reprocessed, the space of the sky between the tail and the back of the leg is brighter than the rest of the sky. That spot was not darkened down as much as everything else, and so just put a little bit of polish on an image like this, and you're off to the races, just about.
I will say, did you see the comment? Gary had a great comment that I didn't even think about, and that is, wishes the tail was away from the body. And that would be nice if that tail was kind of up.
Yeah.
And if there's a fly right behind that horse, that tail might be sweeping around just to knock away any errant flies. So yeah, that could be just a moment later or before this.
Yeah. Give a bit more definition to the legs as well, because it's not breaking the line of the legs a little bit. So yeah, it's still a great image, and please take away the fact that we all love this image and really enjoyed looking at it. And you're dealing with a live animal, a wild animal. It's never easy. It's never easy. One thing I wanted to point out to everybody, I should have said this right at the beginning. When the show's finished, I'm going to create chapters in the show notes, and in those chapters I'll also put a link to the image on Flickr, so that after the show you can go look at the image on Flickr. You'll have the link to the Flickr image, and you can look at the data, you can look at the comments, you can look at the captions that the authors have put there, and of course please go and support them when you visit them, and leave a comment for them. So that will come after the show, but for now we're just going to focus on the image.
And I will add, I have a blog post for every critique show, and even though this one critique show is not on my YouTube channel, I will also have in the blog post a list of the images with links. So if you go to behindtheshot.tv and find this particular episode under BTS Critiques, you'll be able to get them there too.
Absolutely. Ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, The next image, Steve, I'm going to let you kick off this image, and this one is called Varias 2.
Okay, so I'll get to the name in a minute, but I just have to start with, I love this. For this type of image, it's mostly exactly what I want to see. The subject matches the motion, like you're not just panning, but you've got the bike rider. The bike rider is mostly sharp, or at least arguably sharp enough. The aggressive kind of black and white contrast conversion I really, really like. But now let's talk about the title. Titles matter, and I want to explain what I mean by that. Various 2-1 may mean something to the person who made this image, but think about a title as the ability for you to explain something about the image to people who weren't there, so that they understand the critical moment it was. Don and I had a shot on a critique show once that I commented on, and the maker sent me a big long email explaining, no, this is a famous place where I live. But see, I didn't know that. All I had was the shot. So use your titles to at least give some clue to me of where this image is going to go. And then when it pops up, it changes what I see. One trick I heard years ago was jazz song titles can work great for images. That said, the motion made a couple of issues to me. One, if you look, there are wires here. I don't know if it's like cable car, phone wire, electrical wire, but in the motion, they got lost against the high contrast of the sky. So literally to the left of the building and to the right of the other building, in the open white spot, you'll see the lines come and then just stop. Except there's one chunk, or actually 2 or 3 chunks, just floating mid-sky. You got to clean that up. I don't mind them disappearing based on the shot. You don't have to recreate them, but I can't have a piece of wire just kind of floating midstream there. I know that this moment happens fast. However, The writer is not as sharp as I think it should be. And looking at the EXIF data, you did f16 at an eighth of a second. And panning, you don't need, you're blurring the background anyway. You didn't need the f16, and you could have used a little bit more shutter speed to make sure, and maybe a more stable pan or something like that, to try and get that bike rider really, really in focus. Last but not least, on the overview of the shot. The rider is actually, their head is dead center on the corner of a building, but right behind them is a dark spot in the fence. I'm not saying it would even be possible, right? Based on how you panned this and got this. But it would make the image stronger, whether you could do it or not, just to understand. It would make the image stronger if they were against the darker spot, clean spot of that darker area of the fence. On the left-hand side, I don't know if it's a bus or maybe a billboard. I'm not sure. I think it's a bus that's white in like a doorway. I don't need that. I'd either crop that out or darken that. And moving to the bottom, I love the crosswalk coming at me with the horizontal lines, but there's an angled crosswalk right at the bottom that's intersecting it, and it breaks those leading lines leading to the bike rider. I would crop above that first horizontal crosswalk line. But again, I love this shot.
Wonderful. Thanks, Steve. Over to you, Don.
Yeah, I also like the processing. It's deep and rich in a sense, and it is the image to me is about the rider. And I often have to tell myself, well, what is the image about? In some scene that's busier, where the subject might be a small component of that. And then ask myself, well, what in the image doesn't support the subject or the narrative of the subject? And for me, it's almost everything above the bike rider, right? It's if I'm looking at this image, I look at the big white blob of sky. And your eyes will typically go to the brightest part of an image. And so there you have it. I would actually take the top of this image way down, past more than half frame, get rid of every element of the sky. Really? Every single pixel of the sky, because this image has a horizontal motion. I'm kind of reading this image horizontally right across the way. And if I can remove the entire sky, then the cyclist becomes the brightest part of the image and really stands out quite brightly. And this image just will be flowing left to right horizontally as a result from that. And I, that's an unconventional thought, but I figured, everything in this image, you would still have that same wonderful sense of motion without the tops of those buildings that are largely uninteresting, as well as the sky as well. So just keep that about the center frame, where you've got some interesting stuff right behind that cyclist, and the pattern, the horizontal lines made by the crosswalk, which would echo really beautifully within that as well. And I'd be personally very happy with the image.
Great comments. Thanks, Don. Yeah, obviously, you've both done a great job of critiquing that image. Like yourselves, very similar sort of feel. I love the action. I love how they've captured the technique is really well done. It's something I've tried many times, and I'm not a great proponent of panning. I'm not very good at it. Especially as I get older, I get less good at it. But this is done sufficiently well where the cyclist is sharp enough, and there's just enough motion to give that dynamic feel to the image, but there still be detail so that you can understand the environment that the cyclist is moving through. Like so many of you are saying in the chat, and you both have said, I really would lose certainly top and bottom, some bottom of this image, just where the kind of crosswalk, or as we would call it, the zebra crossing, they kind of merge together. There's a kind of unusual pattern in the foreground there, which kind of just is a little bit hard to understand. I think it's just where the lines have been painted over each other. I would lose that. And like, again, many of you have said that, we can't help it. Our eyes are drawn to the brightest parts of any image. It's just naturally what we do. And we are drawn to that top part of the image that is, really super bright. Steve, you picked up on the little poster or bus or bright door or something on the left there, I think there's enough space in the image that we could probably crop that out just to take that highlight. Highlights on the edge of a frame are always very distracting. When
they're exit points.
Yeah, it's where your eye can go to and then just disappear, as you say. It can exit the photograph because there's this bright doorway to leave the side of the image. So I would recommend, if there's ever a highlight like that, right on the edge, especially if it's small and distracting in that sense. There's a big highlight in the sky, but your brain tells you it's sky. Here, you're kind of drawn to that brightness on the side of the frame. So I would crop that out. But yeah, really great shot. Don, you mentioned the tones of the image, the quality of the blacks through to the whites. Other than the sky being a little bit too dominant, I love the contrast and the quality of the tones in this image. So there was another one that stood out. Thank you everybody in the chat for engaging in each of the images. That's it's always nice to see. So thank you for that. I do have to give a shout out to Kathy, who is a regular viewer of my show, who says, "Yeah, I finally made it to a live while it's live, even though I'm late," which I thought was a great comment. Thank you, Kathy, for taking the time to tune in live. Of course, these shows are always available to watch later, but it's great to be part of the chat. So thank you to all of you who are here with us watching it. It really is, it's really not a show without you folks watching, so thank you for that. Right, Don, are you ready to take the lead on this next one?
I am. Let's see.
Dying to hear what Don says on this image.
Right. This next image is called Portrait of a Tattooed Model.
Yeah, and Nicosia, Cyprus 2021 is also in the title. Now, again, we're talking, titles are important, okay? Tattooed model. I spent a lot of time looking at this image to try to find a tattoo. I couldn't spot a tattoo. And so it was sent on a wild goose chase by that title. So anyhow, that aside, so this is a portrait, and it's trying to show somebody's character. And there's a lot of character sort of building elements here. You've got the hairstyle. You've got the fact that there are headphones around his neck, which kind of shows his interests and passions in life, and so on. And so you want to try to build up that. And if they've got tattoos, well, then they might be representative of that person's upbringing, passions in life, beliefs, etc. And I wouldn't want to see the tattoos in the image. You're teasing me too much with the title. Okay, that aside. The image is harshly lit. And that's not a bad thing, especially if it's an environmental portrait. But, and so like it kind of doubles the patterns of the shadows on the face, which is kind of an interesting effect. I'm of two minds of that. In some ways I can like it. In other cases it can be a distraction. If possible, and if this was a staged portrait, it might be interesting to see the shadow from one of the braids actually cross over the eye and some of the facial features to make it a more important element if you are choosing to use this harsh light. Take advantage of what it offers in terms of shadows as well, including the shadow on the background. But in this harsh light, one would expect there to be a catch light in the eyes. There is not. And it is very distracting to me that there is no catch light in either of the eyes. You even have on the right eye, a camera left, but the model's right eye, a reflection of the white wall in behind, kind of catching the side of the eye, which isn't bad, but there's nothing on the other eye. And to me, it's taking me away from the image and the personality that I'm supposed to be introduced to.
Yeah, I'll go next. It's definitely a tattooed model. There's a tattoo definitely on the right shoulder there. It's just an unusual title because they're not particularly dominant in the story that's been told in this particular image. I love environmental portraiture. It's something I've spent a long time in my career doing. I love people in their environment. I love those elements that tell you a little bit about the person, about what they're doing. So the headphones in this instance, I think, are almost critical to this portrait in many ways, in that it ties the person to a time, it ties them to a place, and the the grit and the emotion of this image, I just think is really compelling. I love the angle. I love the angle of the body and how the model's leaning forward, and then that's amplified and exaggerated by the shadow, this shadow that's leaning on the wall. And it all really, really held together for me until I got a little bit deeper into it and I just looked at the treatment of the image. And there's quite a harsh edge to certainly the back of the head and some of the braids on the left-hand side of the image. And I think, obviously, as you know, when we're critiquing an image, we can't help but make some assumptions, and forgive us if we're completely off. But I've fallen foul of this a couple of times when someone has tried to make the background completely white. I have a feel, this is obviously a wall. It's maybe a white piece of seamless or something, and they've just really cranked the exposure, I think, on the backdrop to make it really white, maybe to get rid of dirt marks or just to rid of grayness or vignetting or something on that background. But in doing so, they've really maxed out the exposure on that white to the point that it's really interfering with the relationship of the portrait against that background, and the edges unfortunately just fall down a little bit around the model's head. But it doesn't take away the fact that this is, just a great story being told in an environmental portrait. So I really, really enjoyed looking at this image. Steve?
So to me, the black and white is spot on. I like the treatment on the model himself. The way the hair pops, the t-shirt is nice, the skin tones came out nice in the black and white. And I actually was fascinated when Don commented on the shadow, because to me, I really like the shadow here. And somebody else commented on the shadow in the chat as well. I think the shadow here is almost like a second person in the photo, and I kind of dig that. I really like the framing. The tight crop touching the top of the head, his left shoulder, our camera right, slightly being out of frame. Where it is cropped on the chest, I like all of that. But I'm just going to reemphasize it, even though everybody has. Tattooed model. Yes, I did the same thing. I looked for a long time before realizing that his right arm, right shoulder has tats on it. So in this case, it's not only not informing us, it's informing us and making us have to search for something instead of just looking at the photo. The eyes really without a catch light to me are the big issue in this image. I don't care if you create them yourself. Steal them from another photo and put them in here, because the eyes look dead, right? I mean, it's really honestly, a catch light is what brings a portrait like this to life. And what's weird to me is that there's no catch light in that closest eye, even though there's a huge bright white spot on the cheek. I don't know how that catch light didn't hit the eye. It just must be just enough off angle. Again, I wish that there was some texture behind him wall-wise, not a ton, because like Alastair said, this is so white. I'm not sure he wasn't cut out at points, that there wasn't something over that prominent shoulder, because the line of the prominent shoulder, the line of the back of the headphones, even the line on some of the hair on his head seems almost cut out. In fact, that little braid flying out behind his ear, the hairs are starting to disappear because of the processing going so aggressively on that. The one thing I would touch up, there's not a lot, I would take the little white scuff mark off the headphones and just clean that up, because it does stand out to me. Other than that, I think you're on the right track 100%. It just needs a little massaging.
Indeed, yeah, and a lot of people saying very similar things in the chat. I think a lot of people would really love to see a catch light in the eyes just to bring some life to them. So yeah, another great portrait. Thank you for submitting that one. And yeah, thank you to all those who are joining in the chat. Even if you're joining late, we really appreciate you being here. So thank you for that. Right, I'm excited because I get to go first on the next image. And this was one image that Steve and I were looking at yesterday saying, yeah, can we put this one in the critique, because this is kind of cool and it's really an interesting shot. So the next image, it's called Keys with a whole string of random letters. So I'm just going to call it Keys for now. Yes, really something different with this shot, which is always compelling to see something that you don't see very often. A beautiful shot of someone playing a very beautiful piano, a Steinway piano, but done in a very interesting way. I just loved. I'm a sucker for a story. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Everybody who knows me, I love a good story in a photograph. And this one just had me thinking, what are they playing? Are they any good? What's going on? Who is she? What is this image about? Because there's this obviously very dramatic lighting, very, very hard to comprehend lighting in many ways in this image. I love the clarity in what is, when you're a pianist, the most important part is the hands, right? They're the magic of any image. The clarity of the keys and the hands, just fantastic in itself. I loved the hands and the keys in this image. Then you have just a glimpse of the music that they're playing. So what is it? What is the tune? But I couldn't quite figure out what the lighting was here. I'm actually more excited to hear what Don says about this image than actually critique it myself, because I just, is it flare on the lens from a very directional window light? The way it's interacting with the keys, I'm thinking, is it because it's a stage light and there's some, fog machine action going on? Just lots and lots of questions with this image. And I love something that makes me ask questions. Something I would like to critique about it is the back of the clothing is just maybe needing, burnt in a little bit, just to just darken that down a little bit, just to lose the highlights of the pattern and the fabric, just to give a little less information about the pianist. To be honest, I want it to focus to really be on the hands. And you've got all this directional light pointing at the hands. For me, the main thing here would be just to be, maybe even touch the music down a little bit, but maybe a vignette around it just to take away some of that detail. But yeah, I love this. Absolutely love this shot. I can't stop looking at it. Steve.
It's funny. I am absolutely transfixed by the comments that are lighting up on this photo. And the girl who left the fridge open nailed it. This looks fantastic for like a CD album cover. There is so much potential in this shot. When this shot first came up, it has impact. I mean, immediate, strong impact. The focus on the name Steinway. You immediately know, like Alastair said, I wonder if they're any good. They're playing a Steinway, right? People usually don't own Steinways in their home unless they're real players. So I almost immediately know that this person is probably good. The focus on the hand and the ring is spot on. Even the sheet music is readable. Just really honestly, there is so much potential here that when I first saw this shot, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to critique. But again, I do what I always do. I start describing it to myself vertically, and I find things that, again, this is an amazing shot. Put this on somebody's album cover, whoever it is. That said, though, there are things that can happen in this shot that I believe would make it stronger. The back of the dress or top or whatever it is. I think it's a dress because the pattern does seem to go all the way down. That bright white spot on that back left shoulder is distracting. And you have this bright stream of light coming in. I almost wish that bright stream of light took over that area to make it less obvious as a pattern, because I just keep going saying, what is that pattern? What is that pattern? The light rays are super bright in the middle, but they weren't used to blend that shoulder in. And here's the other thing is, look at the arm. The shadows come down and they literally stop in the light rays stop in almost a straight line at the back of the arm. and just above the hand, almost forming a point. And that's weird to me. I don't know if they streaked the sheet music, if that's window light that just happened to stop in a perfectly straight line. I'm not buying that because the rays do continue. Why do they suddenly turn dark on a harsh edge? I don't get, and it's a disconnect for me. And then if you look to the left of the hand, the keys are not obstructed by light rays, but there are light rays behind them, below them. On the far left, there's light rays below, but not above. I'm confused as to how that section of the piano is pure dark, but the light rays made it in the same place there. There's just some of those disconnects, but even with all that, and I think some of those being addressed would make it stronger. Even with all that, my gosh, print this thing big, be proud of it. It's a great shot. I love the square crop, by the way.
Yep. Don?
Okay, you know what I think that the whole scenario is in terms of how this image was taken. The big streaks across the image, that has to be the sheet music itself over a long exposure. It's a 1/5 of a second exposure. Now, the EXIF data says that a flash did not fire, but I bet a flash did fire if it was remotely controlled in some way during that exposure, so that you have two exposures happening at the same time, one from the flash, one from the pan blur, and we're seeing the result of those two sort of getting combined together here, and I really like that effect. You can get similar effects, actually, by getting, at least that would mimic this same look, by putting glare on a window and having that in front of the camera and then shooting through that. So there's a number of ways that this could be achieved, but I think it's the first one that I described. And it's a technique that I've never seen used in this context before. I mean, I've seen it where you kind of have like a flash targeted at the end of an exposure at a second curtain sync, so that you've got like a cyclist going and you can freeze the action and have everything else around it to be blurry, which could have been used in a previous shot that we were talking about, if you had the wherewithal to set that up. But I've never seen it used for, like a pianist or anything related to music. And it's a valuable technique that I think people should use more often. And it serves this image well, as does, I don't think anybody mentioned, the fact that it's in black and white. This image does not need color at all to get the message across. And so photography is a subtractive art. Take things away until you get it right. And to that end, what else I would take away? There are a couple of dots that I can see in the lighter area because this was shot at f32 and any dust on your sensor is going to show through at that point. And if you're doing that, then there's a tiny little white spot between the arm and the person's body that I would clone out while you're in there, because this image does deserve to have the polish applied to it.
And let me add, somebody mentioned, Terry Wagner mentioned in the chat, check the author's photo stream. So I just did. Subscribed. Andreas, great work all around.
Yeah. And something I meant to mention about this image is I had this vision when I looked at this image of the sheet music actually flying off the piano as they're playing this music, and it has this sense of the music flying off the page as they're playing this music, and I just love this image. I really, really loved it, and I love that we can all interpret different things in it. And I'm glad those of you watching and leaving all these great comments agree. Wonderful, wonderful shot. Right, Steve, you're up next to start off image number 5, and the title of it is Torres del Budello. Let me just get that one.
Yeah, and okay, I'm gonna start with what I like about this image, and then I've got some suggestions for the maker of this image. Lots of composition points to me, right? The horizontal is on the lower third. The horizon is. The castle is on the left third. The largest white cloud at the top kind of balances out the castle, or whatever you want to call it, on the left-hand side on the opposite rule of third. The castle is up on a hill, and so you get that kind of raised effect coming down to the rocks. A lot of composition points here. However, I'm going to make a weird analogy. This reminds me of a really good cake, but it has frosting on it, and it's the kind of frosting that you don't like, right? You baked a great cake here. You took what could be a great photo, and then I think you added stuff to it that brought it down. And so I wouldn't even say, go retake it, although that would be great. I would wager that your raw image, if you shot raw here, has everything you need to make this image immediately stronger. It's a little bit overexposed on the side of the building and on the edges of the rocks, those highlights. I would bring all of that down. It's way over processed to me, specifically over sharpened. So anytime you do sharpening, make sure that you are looking at it on a monitor that you trust. And if you don't, throw it onto a really good phone that you trust and see what's going to happen. In this particular case, the over sharpening is really, really harsh. The edges of the rocks, the details in the trees, the halos that you're getting around the trees. In fact, the black and white processing, if you look at the water, like middle to right side of the image and go just above the water, those clouds in the far distance of the horizon have gone gray. So you've over recovered highlights or something here. There's a halo above the water and a halo around all of the bushes. So I guess, and by the way, I do like that you matted it with the white matte. I think your key line around it could be a little bit more bold to separate the photo from that white, if you're into that type of thing. But here's the key takeaway is, less is always more, right? Yeah, clarity's fine. Yeah, texture's fine. Yeah, sharpening is fine. But just be really careful. Less is always more.
Over to you, Don.
I completely agree. Less is more when it comes to processing. Everything in moderation. And actually, I've caught myself going too far in post-processing myself. And so sometimes what I'll do is if I'm working on an image in Photoshop, I'm going to do all of my edits on a duplicated layer so that it's very easy for me to go back, turn the visibility of that layer off to the original image. And sometimes using that as a reference point, I'll actually paint in with a layer mask very lightly some of the original image if the edits were a bit too harsh in certain areas of the frame. And I think that that's a technique that everybody should do. Just revisit the original when you arrive at what you think that final printable version of the image is going to be, or whatever its final purpose is. This reminds me a lot of processing that like the darker sky and such of an infrared image. Now, there's no indication that it is, and the fact that the foliage is roughly the same color as the rocks around it would kind of give me the sense that it isn't. But it would make a really good infrared image. Because then if you were to take the foliage and have that much brighter, because anything that produces photosynthesis reflects like 85% of infrared light. It's very, very bright. And so then the rocks and the surrounding area and the water and the sky would all be darker. I think that would give this image a certain amount of natural punch that would require very little, especially if you're making it black and white and not playing around with any false colors at all. And this was taken with a Canon G1X camera. The reason why I mention that is a lot of people have like maybe a bigger camera that is their main camera, but a smaller camera in their bag, whether it's micro four thirds or just a compact with a fixed lens that they've had converted for infrared photography. And this would be the ideal scenario where, I would take out a photo with my regular camera, but the time of the day isn't great because you're going to get really harsh shadows that don't travel very far from the subject in bright light. And there's no way to diffuse that in a scene like this. So that's why a lot of photographers prefer golden hour or blue hour photography, because you don't have to battle with that light. But an infrared photographer would be so happy in this exact scenario. So that's my contribution. If I were here, what I would do in the field would be to capture it with invisible light.
Did he just say invisible light?
And that's Don said invisible light. Someone had to.
That's something we'll have to dig into, maybe at the break. You've said a lot of great things there, folks. I love the fact that this author has a fantastic eye for composition. I think that's just obvious for everybody to see the position of the horizon and a horizon that's bang on, perfectly level, which is not easy.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's bang on perfectly level. So that's great. The position of the castle itself, the direction that the rocks are taking you, that leading line of that kind of just little ridge of rocks. I also like the way the clouds were just kind of separating around the top of the turrets of the castle. You know, you had this space in the clouds. The timing was great. The composition was great. The critique would be what's already been said. Over-processed. I don't think there's anybody in the comments who hasn't kind of mentioned that it's just over-processed. Even though all the sliders go to 100 on our apps, doesn't mean we need to go there. And I say that jokingly, but yeah, just be subtle with the adjustments that you make here. I don't know about you, but sometimes if an image is on the smaller size of pixels, you know, it can kind of sometimes emphasize everything that's done to it. The smaller the image is, the more things like over-sharpening and stuff really jump out of the image. And this is quite a small file when you look at the file itself, and it's just over-dominated by the amount of processing that's been on it. But the big takeaway from me is everything else, other than the processing and maybe the time of day, everything else is bang on, and people would love to have an eye for photography like this. So yeah, love it. Really, really liked the work that was done to capture this image.
Can I add one thing really quick?
Absolutely.
People say to me sometimes when I say an image is overcooked or overprocessed, and they go, how do I know when I pushed it too far? And I'll give you a clue in this particular image. And I'm going to echo, again, what he said. The bones of this image are great. I don't think you need to go retake it. I think you've got a shot that you could make really amazing. But if you look at the left-hand side of that castle, there is a white line running down it. As soon as you see that halo, you've gone too far.
Yeah. It's a great indicator. Yeah, as soon as you see that kind of ghosting halo effect on any kind of edge, then it's time to move that slider in the opposite direction. Right, gentlemen, I think we'll have a little break before we jump into the final 4 images. So far, so good. The comments are fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for all those images. Steve, I want to jump over here. We're going to jump to BehindTheShot.tv, your website. What's coming up on the show next for you?
I'm doing just shows all the time. I've got one coming up. I just released the one you see there with the 5 presidents. That's David Hume Kennerly, a legendary photojournalist. He was a White House photographer at 27, won a Pulitzer at 25. And Jeff Cable, who is a well-known sports photographer, he photographs for Team USA at the Olympics. He was at the last Olympics, and he was using the Canon R3. And he wrote a big blog post about the R3, and I reached out to him and said he's been on the show before with one of his Olympic shots on one of the normal podcasts. And I said, why don't you come on and let's talk about the R3? And I've been soliciting questions on my Twitter account, which is at Steve Brazill, like Brazil, but 2 L's, to ask Jeff. And we're just going to have a conversation about the R3, specifically in action, using an electronic shutter for action, and what kind of rolling shutter effect is he getting or not, and any other questions that people have about the R3. Looking forward to that. Of course, again, BehindTheShot.tv for the normal podcast. Videos available on YouTube, videos available in your podcast app like Apple Podcasts if it supports video, and if not, there is an audio-only feed as well, and you can always see the pictures at the website. And just loving doing the podcast. I will also add, I've got a workshop coming up, and if anybody's interested in like a multi-genre workshop, Freddie Clark, Santee Photo, who's in the chat, came up with this idea, the Wanderers Photo Workshop in New Orleans. It's going to be January 23rd to 27. And there are, basically think of going to a destination city like New Orleans and capturing the food, the city, and the music of that destination. So we've got Ant Pruitt doing the street photography and like architecture type photography. Freddie, who is a wonderful food and beverage photographer, along with Andrew Scrivani, who's a New York Times contributor, doing the food photography. And I'm doing music photography, and it's all one workshop. And again, the website is wanderersphoto.com. And it's pretty much all inclusive. I should add that before you go see the price. Once you get to the hotel, transportation, food, pretty much everything is included except, of course, alcohol, things like that.
Wonderful. Ant Pruitt, a great friend of ours, a great friend of the show. He's been a guest here on SmugMug Live. He's a wonderful person to be around. I'm sure that'll be a wonderful workshop. Thanks for giving us an insight into the conversations you have at Behind the Shot. I still think the best episode you've ever done is with that Scottish guy. I can't remember his name. It was a really good episode.
What was the name of the location that photo was from? You got to tell me again.
Oh my gosh.
It was the lake and the mountain in the background.
Loch Achtrichen.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the one.
I wasn't going to try and say it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So yeah, lots going on in your world. So go check out that. Steve mentioned there his love of music photography, which was what he'll be teaching at the workshop. Steve was a wonderful guest here on SmugMug Live and gave us a wonderful presentation on the world of live music photography. So go check that out in the playlists here on YouTube. Steve, thanks for doing that for us. It feels like a long time ago now.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, but this last year and a half has been strange.
Yeah, it feels like a long time. We'll need to have you back on very soon. Don, tell us a little bit about Photo Geek Weekly.
So Photo Geek Weekly is my podcast, and there is a second podcast on that website as well called Inside the Lens, which I'm hoping to resurrect, which is a deep dive into specific topics with experts in that field of photography. I've got a couple of guests lined up behind the scenes to have some fun with that. But the main podcast, Photo Geek Weekly, is where 4 stories are selected and picks of the week from me and the guest, and we just banter back and forth about these stories, and we talk about the specs and what they mean, why people want to care about something, the latest scientific advancement or patent or the new camera gear that is coming out on the market, and what makes it more useful or better or worse than what you might already have. So that is a wonderful hour-long discussion, usually about an hour every week, and I'll be keeping that going as long as I possibly can. There will be a slight interruption because I'm also in the process of moving overseas from here where I am in Canada to Eastern Europe in Bulgaria. And that will be happening later this month. So life is chaos at the moment. And I also want to plug, if anybody has not yet gotten a copy of my book, which Alastair is holding up as well.
And Don, we've all got one.
We all got the book. So this book is my magnum opus. I mean, this is the best book that I've ever written, and I don't know if I'm ever going to tackle another project as big as this one was. It's a 384-page book with I think roughly about 90,000 words in the regular edition, hundreds of photographs, all instructional to show you how to take any picture in macro photography, from very simple things to the most complicated things you could ever imagine, all explained with simple details. You can get it in the US. B&H Photo sells it. Of course, I prefer if you buy it directly from me because I make more money and you'll get an autographed copy. And you can get that at skycrystals.ca. Skycrystals, plural, .ca. Only shipping them out for the next maybe week and a half, 2 weeks, because my daughter's passport came in. I just sold my car today. You know, everything is moving fast. So as soon as we get everything buttoned down, we buy tickets and we're out of here, and you can't get the book anymore. So if you want a copy, get it now.
Bulgaria, here we come.
And let me add again, not intended to be a commercial, but or not even because I know Don, because I wouldn't have to say this. It is hands down the best photo book I own. It is absolutely stunningly beautiful and has 3D images, and he includes 3D glasses. It's insanely good book.
There you go. Terry says their copy's on the way.
And there is a Kindle version as well, as somebody mentioned. You can get it on Amazon. Please don't buy the physical copy from Amazon, because it's just going to send me the order and Amazon gets the cut out of that. So if you are going to go for a hardcover, come to me, please. But yes, the Kindle version does work.
Yeah, support the artist directly if you can, folks, in all forms of our world. It is an incredible book. I know we're kind of talking a lot about it, but it is like no book of macro photography
Yeah.
I've ever seen. It is the hands down encyclopedia of what you need to know about the genre. And again, Don was very kind to come on SmugMug Live, and give us an insight into making frozen bubble photography, which was a lot of fun. It was a great episode, and talks about a lot of his techniques and some of the tech he uses to make this macro photography. So again, here on SmugMug Live YouTube channel, go check out Don's episode in the playlist there. It's a wonderful thing. So good luck with getting rid of all the rest of the books before your move, and we look forward to seeing you over here in Europe very soon.
It will be soon, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, exciting times. Right, time to move on to our next image. We're doing pretty good on time here, so we're aiming for about the hour 30 it takes us to get through 9 images, but it's already time for number 6. And Dawn, you're going to go first on this one.
Okay, so I'm just going to call out the elephant in the room right away. The watermark over the child's face. I mean, it's the first thing you look at.
And
when
I've
you
got
see
nothing to
this
say
image.
now.
So, but I mean, this is a useful discussion, and I've gone back and forth with my own work about watermarks and when they're useful and when they're not, and so let's have that discussion for a few minutes right here, because here the watermark is a big distraction from the subject itself. So, what is the purpose of a watermark? This purpose of a watermark would be the kind that you would find on a photo proof from your child's school, so that you can't frame the proof copy and not go and buy one from the photographer. That's the purpose of those big obstructive watermarks, is to just give you an idea of what the image is before you pay for it. But this is not that context. It's not that purpose in any way. So I try to make my watermarks, if I include them, very small, unobtrusive in the bottom corner, but to still have them there in many cases. And that gives me some protections under various copyright acts, where that can be considered rights management or copyright management information, and that gives you stronger remedies under under whatever legal system that is if people remove them. But I realized early on that if somebody's going to steal my image and make a print of it for themselves without paying me, they would have never bought it from me to begin with. And so I'm not really losing anything in that regard. And yes, if somebody does it, I have my own legal process, and I can get a lawyer involved if that's the case. But the point is that watermarks should be very unobtrusive. And the first thing I look at, instead of her eyes, I look at the copyright symbol here. And so that is said, I have said my piece on it. I love this girl's expression. This is just adorable. It's cute. Just big puppy dog eyes staring right at you, like you'd give this child anything that they asked for. But there's also a certain character here that comes through in different ways. It's not a completely clean face. You know, she was eating something earlier in the day and you can see some schmutz on her face, and that's fine. It adds to the character. What also adds to the character is that it is likely, in my opinion, that this girl's mother cut her hair, because there are strands of her bangs that are uncut that come through and cross her face, which just makes her even more adorable, right? And so that adds character to the expression, and the black and white treatment is nice. Could have used a little bit of a brighter treatment in the eyes. There is a catch light there, so that's good. It's not circular, but it doesn't have to be. It gives a little bit of life, brighten up the eyes a little bit, and I like the expression, and I like the tightness of it. You don't need the top of the head. I hate when everybody includes the top of the head in every portrait. It's not required in almost every scenario, especially if you're getting in close. So there, I've said my piece. I like the photograph.
Yeah. I'll go next. It has that look that I recognize very, very well from my own daughter. Like, you know, I'm about to melt and cave in and give this little one whatever she's about to ask for. You know, that kind of look. You've already mentioned the watermark. I think we're all going to mention the watermark. As someone who has spent many years selling portraits, I understand the concept of watermarking, and I know it's one of those, as we would say here, Marmite things. You either love it or you hate it. They do serve a purpose. The position of it for me is very uncomfortable. When things get close to your physical eye in real life, there's just something very unsettling about having something so close to the eyes. And even though it's a digital watermark, just being so close to the eye is very unsettling for me. Looking beyond that, though, fantastic portrait. It is a little bit over-processed in the skin for me. I would like to have seen a little bit more detail. It's got that porcelain effect that we sometimes talk of, where it's just been smoothed too much. Someone just mentioned there, is it a COVID haircut? I like that comment. It's as someone who attempted to cut his children's hair during the pandemic, I didn't make as good a job as this. I love those strands coming down either side of the face. The crop is really nice. There's, as Don said, I like the fact you're not seeing the top of the head or anything above that. I really like that type of crop. We can see below the chin. Again, just kills me with the eyes. They're just like, oh my gosh, whatever you want, you can have it. Just a wonderful moment. And we'll look beyond the watermark in this case. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. Great background as well. Found a great spot to take this image. And it looks like natural light, which I love. Steve?
So it does look like natural light. The catch lights in the eyes, if you zoom in on them, they do look like window light. It's interesting to me. I like the catch light, the smaller one. The position is identical on both eyes, and yet the camera right eye, her left eye, has a second larger catch light in it that didn't make it into the left eye, which is interesting to me. Again, it's an angle thing. But you have here, again, she could be asking for cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're going to say, okay. You have a beautiful, wonderful young model here with wonderful eyes to photograph. And you've got that Peter Hurley style crop. I love his, concept that it's not like people don't know the rest of the head isn't there, right? You can omit that and you're okay. I am going to touch on the watermark, even though it's already been said, but Gary kind of said something that cracked me up, and that is maybe this is the one with the tattoos. The watermark, go back. Here's my thing on the watermark. Reverse this video, go back to everything that Don just said and listen to it again. That watermark would have the same legal effect if it was small and in the bottom right-hand corner. It would have the same branding effect if it was small and in the bottom right-hand corner. Putting it across her face, to me, was just not the best choice that you could have made. I like the crop. I think a little bit more room on the left or right might be nice. I like the crop, but here's where I'm going to go. While I love the eyes, and I personally love that they are super sharp, I think they're too sharp, especially in comparison to the porcelainized skin, the over-softened skin. And you soften the skin everywhere except right below the lip where, like Don said, you can see almost like a crust of food or milk or something down there. The hair. So the hair looks either natural fall off of sharpness from the lens and exposure choice, or you manually softened it, is my guess. Because if you look at the frame right hair over her shoulder, it's all soft and blurred except one spot right in the middle, right where her shoulder would be behind the hair. It's super sharp there, but everything around it is blurry. And it's the same with her bangs. Her bangs are all soft and blurry, but the top of her head right at the edge of the frame is super over sharpened, like to the point of artifacts. So again, it's really just going to be, there's so much potential here. You have an amazing photograph here. You do not need to take it again. You just need to go back and revisit some of those small things to clean it up a little bit.
Oh, you're muted, Alastair.
Sound is just not my friend today. too many buttons. Yeah, thanks for those comments.
I'm dying for this next one.
Beautiful picture of Ava. Yeah, so that brings us on to, what are we on? Number 7, which is, I get to go first on this one. This one is titled On the Boardwalk on a Rainy Day. Yes. This is an image that I want to look at and talk about, because when I first saw this image, my brain instantly told me I was looking up through a glass walkway or that type of thing, you know, these kind of glass walkways we're familiar with now. And then you process it a little bit and you read the title and, oh, it's a boardwalk, and then you realize it's flipped upside down. I love the tonal quality of it. I love the control on all these shiny surfaces. It would be really easy to have a lot of these wet, shiny surfaces be really overexposed. I just love the way it's been handled. I love the way the person with what looks like an umbrella on a rainy day is kind of in a pretty good position between these high-rise buildings, and maybe would have liked them to be half a step sooner, maybe, just to be nicely framed between those two high-rise buildings. But maybe at that point their feet were together, so this was the moment where their feet were apart and you could see the dynamic nature of it. If this had been a regular shot and we weren't looking at the reflection, I would have probably wanted a little bit more space at the bottom of the image, a little bit more foreground, a little bit of space for the feet in the image. The feet seem really, really close to the bottom of the image here. But I get what the author's doing here. They're trying to, remove the fact that the real image, the actual person, is in the bottom of the frame. So they've tried to, crop as much of that person out. I wonder what it would be like, though. Would it work? Would it look like the reflection when we saw their actual legs at the bottom, just to give it a little bit more room up? And then, some other things that maybe could improve it. Do we need all the space at the top? There's a lot of boardwalk up there. But overall, I love the kind of tones, the muted nature of it. You can really sense the wetness of this wet boardwalk on a rainy day. So yeah, I thought this was really well thought of. Also, sorry, one last thing. I also love all the diagonal lines. Sometimes diagonal lines, which we've spoke about before with tram lines and power lines, they can be really distracting. There's something about this image that I don't feel that. The way you've got the boardwalks going diagonally, you've got the fixings of the boardwalk going diagonally the other way. Yeah, I just really like this. Thought it was really well seen. Not many people would have seen this image. Steve?
No, and I love this image. The reflection, the amount of blur. It's almost like a watercolor painting, except that you have some amazingly sharp edges, clearly a photograph. The color palette is just wonderful. There's so much to like about this. The leading lines or angles that Alastair is referring to, you have the slats of the wood and the gaps between them going one way, but then you have the screws going the other way. And that's the reason I don't think you would want to lose more at the top, because you would mute that effect of the extended, white-looking screws, which draw more of your attention to me than the slats between the boards, simply because they're brighter. So if you cut it down, I think you would lose that. I actually really like the square crop here. There's not a lot that I would say could improve this image except a couple of things. One, I don't know if there are imperfections in the wood. I don't know if there are bubbles in the water, but it's kind of on the left-hand side at the top rule of third, and there's some just to the left and above the person's parasol. I would clean some of those up that are pure white or really, really bright and kind of tone them down a little bit that way, clone them out or something. I do agree with Alastair. I find myself instantly wanting this person not to be at the very, very bottom of the photo. I don't know how it would look, though, if you kept the legs in, or any of the legs, because they wouldn't be, this is clearly flipped upside down, I think, they wouldn't be blurred, and they might draw your attention too much. So I get what you're doing. I still wish that they were there. And Alastair made the comment that the person is almost between the buildings. I wish they were centered between the buildings if you had taken a burst. I understand their feet may not have been in the right position or separated, but still you did one other thing right, and that is the white lines of the screws don't go through the head, don't go through the parasol. The parasol and everything above the shoulders is quote unquote in a clean spot between the two screw lines. There's a lot to love in this image. Little details, I think, would make this insanely good, but it's already a beautiful shot.
Thanks, Steve. Don?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add at this point. I agree with everything. The comments on this image, the description said that it was originally posted to Instagram, and they're going through and moving content over to Flickr. So, I mean, good on them for that. But Instagram encourages a square crop, of which this is. And so if you are revisiting this image now, I might take a little bit off the top, not a whole lot, but just enough so that the screws going on a diagonal up towards the upper left portion of the frame, they actually hit the corner. And so that would be a stronger point. So you're just taking a little bit off the top to put that into the corner there. And, you know, again, just helps that line.
You're talking about a COVID haircut?
Yeah, just a little bit, and it doesn't have to be a lot. You know, the other sides of the frame I think are perfect. You can't get away by moving the bottom up at all, because if you do, then the feet will feel cut off, even if they are not in the reflection. It would just be too close to the edge of the frame. And so I think it is what it is to make this work. And if this was posted to Instagram with a vintage filter applied to it, or whether it was taken on film, I like that vintage feel that the image has. And even other things too that I don't know if there was any artistic intent within this, but some of the wood panels are a slightly different color, and thereby their reflection of the material. Like there's one going through the building on the left-hand side that is more red than the others. That kind of separation of color and tone along those bands actually helps those lines mean more to me in the image, because they are... it's not just lines intersecting across the entire frame. They have a meaningful purpose, and they are serving to have some shifts along the way. I would almost, even in post, try to accentuate any of those differences that you could find in the frame so that they would become even more obvious and break the pattern a little bit more.
Interesting comments. I'm going to give a shout out to James, who made an interesting comment. He calls out the contrast between the softness of the reflection and the sharpness of the boards. That's a great way to describe it, and it's something I felt without really realizing that's how I would have liked to have described it. Great shout there, James. Yeah, the sharpness of all those lines combined with the softness of the reflection and the color palette, just wonderful. Love it. Absolutely great. That was a great choice. I like that one. All right, Steve, you get to go next.
Actually, real quick, let me add this. That shot is a great example of the fact that it's a great example of critiquing and the critique show concept. It's a perfect example of you can have an amazingly strong image, like a phenomenal image. My gosh, it's so good. And yet there are still things that people can see that would even take it, elevate it.
Yep, there's always something, and we can always be learning. Right, as I said, Steve, you get to go first on this next one, which I'm really pleased about, because this is a very interesting image, and I know you had lots to say about it when we first looked at it. This one is simply called B-W.
Yeah, for black and white, and this is a perfect example of a title that works. I almost would have called it W-B, just because the order of the colors, right? I would frame this. I would print this huge and large and frame it. I could see this on a wall behind a receptionist in an office building. It's clean. It's fun. It's very nice on so many different levels. The monochrome feel of the black and white, but it's not black and white, right? That's not actually a real black. That's almost like a printer's black, which is a mixture of cyan, magenta, and black. Even though CMYK printing has a pure black ink, most blacks that print are not the black ink. It's a combination of inks. And it has that monochrome feel, and yet it doesn't. The handprints stand out, obviously, in color. The dirtiness of the top of the left white wall is just spot on. I love everything about this. And then this happens. The handprints, to me, are the story. This is an abstract art piece. What makes it is that, wait, there's handprints on the wall in different colors, but they're right at the edge. So framing it would be difficult, because if you put it in a frame, unless it was like a wrapped canvas, you're going to lose part of that. They're too close to the edge. I want to see the entire handprints. I don't know where they went. I don't know if they're on the wall. Maybe that was a corner. It would seem weird to me, but still, I want all the handprints. That would be great. The black, I honestly thought that line between the black and white is so sharp. I thought somebody took a black square, threw it on the 2/3 of the image on the right, played with blending modes in Photoshop. But I don't know. I mean, it looks like it's got gradients of paint. They could have used the luminosity mode or something, but it's such a sharp line. And here's the interesting thing that makes me wonder. This could be brilliant if this is just a blend mode of a black square on top of a white wall. There's 2 white dots on the left-hand side of the black area that look like it was black paint on the wall that was scratched off. So I'm not sure that it's a black overlay. And I love that I'm not sure. At the same time, I'd probably remove those. But if you look close, the lines follow through. Again, just really, really well done. And then one last thing I would do, and this is so nitpicking. The right-hand side of the black appears to have a narrow vignette. The top corner and bottom right corner and right side are dark. That vignette doesn't appear to exist on the left, and it's not needed. Whatever's making that top right corner, right edge, and bottom right corner darker, do away with that. Or make it more subtle. I don't think you need that.
Great comments. Thanks, Steve. Don?
I love this shot, and it's a simple image, so that it's kind of hard to find things to talk about, but there's a couple ideas. Number one, the very left edge of the frame. I agree with Steve that it should be sort of extended that way, but I can see signs of why it couldn't be, because especially at the very, very top left and very, very bottom left, right at the edge of the frame, there's some little spots that might indicate that whiteness of the wall breaks apart. There's just some I don't know what it would be, but the deterioration of that particular wall. I'd clean those up. I'd edit them out. But it could give me an indication that might be as far as you were able to get without things getting really, really busy into the white area and keeping things nice and simple. But you know, this is an image that could have easily been overcooked in post. I mean, I would be very tempted to crank up the, whether it's a texture slider or clarity or what, just to make this pattern more pronounced. And I'd have to remind myself that that's not needed here, because the subtlety of the textures really work well in the context of what it is that we're looking at. Beyond that, it's really hard to say how I would look at this image differently unless I was making it my own art piece. Like if I had a day and this was my image to work on and modify and improve in some way, I mean, what would I do? You would have to do something with accentuating those handprints, right? Like maybe adding handprints to it, maybe getting passersby, if I had the permission, to put a handprint on a different part of the wall somewhere, like maybe a small child's print near the bottom, or maybe borrow a neighborhood cat and put the paws in paint and then put cat paws. I don't know where I'm going with this, but if I have a whole day to be creative, I'm going to start doing zany things. So, but it's not needed. The image is great without any additional work, I think.
Thanks for that, Don. It's actually quite amazing that such a simple, such a minimalist image can have so much story. I've said earlier, I love story in photograph. It's what attracts me to almost any kind of creative is the story. And here we have the most minimalist image that is probably in the entire group, and the story is incredible. My brain can't stop thinking about who put the handprints there, what were they doing that made their hands leave a print like that? Steve, I'm not sure if my first reaction was, this they've cropped out the hands. It's just too tight. I don't know. There's also something kind of cool about it in some ways. I don't know. It is very, very tight. Maybe it's just too tight. Maybe, but I
understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you that part of the mystery is
Yeah.
Where are they going?
Yeah. Yeah, really, the mystery is probably the perfect word for this. When I first started looking at it, thinking that is maybe the most perfect vertical paint job I've ever seen. Like, how is that line so crisp? To the point where I thought, maybe it is, an overlay or something that, has been done in post, because it is so straight. But then there's a few comments you've mentioned it, Steve, about the little scuff marks or the little white marks on the wall. I think they're in some ways critical to the understanding of what you're looking at. There's this raised texture on the wall. Maybe it's like a stucco or an Artex or something on the wall that's just raised enough that as someone's went past it with, carrying a box or moving a desk or who knows what, they've just scuffed some of that black paint off, which to me, it helps me understand that this is a black painted wall with the most perfect straight line I've ever seen a painter do. So, really, really interesting. I love the mystery, trying to understand it. This is something I would hang. Definitely. And I love when I come across an image that you just know this would be a talking point wherever you put this image, whether it be in an office, a hotel, your house. Love it. I saw a wonderful comment. I have to pull the comment up. Let me find it. Oh my goodness, you're all talking so much. It's great. Terry says, my walls are always like this after my grandkids leave the bathroom. Never thought of taking an image of them. Right? It's true. Sometimes it's the simplest things, maybe even things that you find frustrating at the time. They've left handprints everywhere, but it can turn into something like this, which, really, really enjoyed that one. Right, gentlemen.
See, Rami's comment is interesting. He said, I don't know what you're seeing on my screen. It looks like a dirty piece of paper with handprints. Fascinating how different people can see things differently, because I love this.
Yep. Can't beat an image that has us all talking. You may be right. I just felt it was a wall. Interesting comments. We're definitely going to look at that more. And as I've said previously, we will post all the links with the chapter marks after the show. We'll go back through the show and add all the links to these images so that you can go look at the image in greater detail. You can read about the author, look at the EXIF data, and obviously investigate the author more on Flickr. Go look at their photo stream and look at some of the other work that they do. Right, last one. Don, you get to finish today.
All right.
Image number 9, and it's called Sailing California. Now, I have to let me just say, Don, I just have to point out, I have added a little white border to this image just so that we can see the edge of the frame, because it is so black on the left of the frame there. So I personally have added that. Apologies for that, but it really needed it for the live stream.
Yes, thank you for that. I look at this image and the title, and we're talking about titles throughout this episode. I'm glad that it has the word sailing in it. I might have been able to guess California because of the well-known bridge in the background, but I am not a boat aficionado. I wouldn't be able to tell if this was a sailboat, at least not at first glance. And yes, there's ropes going off on either side, and I might question as to what they're for, but I wouldn't have put two and two together. But now that actually puts some context into what's going on. And, if there's wind in the scene, then there's going to be, less than still water. And so that all plays into this environment. I like that it's taken from a lower angle and that you can see the bridge, obviously, in the background, which is, helpful for that angle. And the reflection, at least on the left person's glasses, I think are really cool. And there's sort of a gaze, a direction, sort of a real purpose as to what he's looking at out of the frame, even though that face doesn't have a whole lot of room to go into, which is normally a tense sort of confrontational type of thing. But I don't really mind it here because that gaze extends all the way across the frame to the person on the right. And they're both looking at the same thing. And so that kind of creates a really nice line. And obviously you wouldn't be able to see what they're looking at because it's well off in the distance. So I think that, we haven't had a lot of color images in this series. So color I think is important for the bridge itself. The yellow that the people are wearing is a bit bright and distracting from other elements, including the facial expressions, but it's necessary and it's important to have those bright colors when you're out on the waterway. So it's hard for me to say much else about this. The only other thing that I don't like, and it could be easily fixed by just reframing the shot, pay attention to where people's hands are. Don't cut off fingers. Don't have them hitting the edges of the frame. Don't cut off anybody's limb at a joint. All of those things apply here. And so the person on the left, both of his hands are sort of suffering from that. So a bit of reframing would be helpful in order to make things look a little bit more natural there.
Thanks, Don. I love the intensity of this image. Personally, I knew straight away they were sailing. The person at the back's got the rudder. You've got the various guy lines and stuff that you need on when you're sailing, and safety lines around the boat to stop you ending up in the cold stuff. But I love the intensity of the gaze, right? What are they staring at? What are they about to run into? What are they trying to avoid? Where are they going? All that type of thing really compels me in this image. The colors are really punchy and help with the kind of understanding of the sport that is a lot about the kind of protective clothing that they wear. I think we can all agree it's probably Golden Gate Bridge, right? It's a pretty well-known bridge in California. And I think is that the famous coral fog that's surrounding the top of the bridge and making it a fairly grey, wet experience for these folks. My problems with the image come from the mostly the edges of the image. As you said, Don, the cropping of hands and limbs is always something you have to be very careful of. But on the far left hand of this image, we have this black triangle right in the corner of the frame. Looking at this image, I can't quite get my head round. Is it the pier of the bridge itself that's just really, really black and in complete shadow, or is it?
That's one of, I think, if you look in between them, you see one of the, spires or whatever you want to call it of the bridge.
Yeah.
One of the suspension. I think this is the next one.
Yeah, that was my initial
some kind of pilaster.
That was my initial thought. Or is there a canopy on the craft? Is it a craft that has a little a little cabin up front, and this is just the edge of that, and his right hand is leaning against the edge of that. I think if it was the pier of the bridge, they are very close to the pier of that bridge. But nevertheless, whatever it is, it needed some detail in it to give us that understanding of truly what that part of the image is. It's just this real black, harsh, triangular block of nothingness at the edge of the print. It's almost the complete opposite of what we were talking about earlier with the highlight on the edge, making you want to leave this frame. This is this hard stop right on the edge of the frame that is really quite abrupt, especially when they're both looking there. That's where both the subjects are looking to go, and there's just this solid black mass. So that's my main criticism. I also would have preferred the timing to be difficult to get the Golden Gate Bridge in just a slightly different position. I love the story of the fact they're underneath the bridge or about to pass underneath it, but it just crops right through the top of the gent's head there, and just maybe a few seconds either before or after to get the same kind of dynamic feel, but in a different position.
I think that it is there's a cabin in the front of the boat, and I was just flipping through the photographer's stream, and there's a photograph taken from inside that little cabin area.
Yeah,
so that might
would
be
make
the mystery
sense.
there.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So in that case, you really need to get closer to the person in the frame. It's tight quarters, right? There's not a lot of room in these crafts. I couldn't imagine they would have been that close to the bottom of the pier of the Golden Gate Bridge. There'd be a lot of turbulence there. But yeah, if you've got a cabin like this, you really want to get a little bit closer, maybe even a wider angle, and get
this is already shot
it.
at 16 millimeters.
Yeah.
So at 16 millimeters, they're pretty close already.
Yeah, absolutely. But
so
yeah, it does
me,
disturb it for me.
For me, the Golden Gate Bridge and sailors, this is a fantastic subject matter. Nice color. Love what you've got with the bright colors, and you captured them, I believe, accurately, which I like, and mostly a nice exposure. Somebody else mentioned this in the chat, and it's one of the things that I've been curious about. And I suppose it could be shade from that cabin, except that this is an overcast day, so there isn't that much light to create this much of a difference. The front person's right hand, camera left, right at the edge of the frame. And by the way, again, I'm going to echo what Don said. I wish I could see the bottom hand that's sitting on his knee, and I wish I could see all of this hand with some room around it. Understand, you're already at 16 millimeters. You may not have been able to, but I sure would have tried for that. Why is that hand so much darker than his other hand to the point where it doesn't match? There is on this thumb, there is a light area. Maybe he's just super dirty. The vest looks dirty. But there is a disconnect to me on the color of the hand. The horizon is not level. And you could make the argument that the Dutch angle adds tension here and adds energy here. I understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think the tension here is the fact that the guy in the back's arm is around the safety cable. And you can see the bottom, the right side of the boat is way low. This boat is already at an angle. That's the tension. I'd rather see the land and the horizon on the right and left under his arm. I'd rather see that level and let their angle be the tension. I agree with Don. I like the angle of attack of the photo being low, but it feels a little bit like a child took it there. You're so low. I think if you had gotten higher, you'd fix one big problem I have, and that is the way the bridge is intersecting the hat. If you raised up a little bit, that would bring his head down in between the bridge and the safety cable and get his head a little bit more, at least, in a clean spot. And I think in many ways that would make it a stronger image. Overall, my big thing is, and again, I don't know that it was possible. You're already at 16 millimeters, but I wonder if this is not the shot for a fisheye, because I need more breathing room. They're on the open sea. They're being bashed around by, white caps and waves. There's water spots on the glasses. It's overcast. I need to feel the environment, not just that they're in a boat. So breathing room would really help.
Great comments. That is our 9. Wonderful, wonderful group of images. Thank you so much, both of you, for helping go through those images. But I think even more importantly, thank you everybody who's been watching and getting involved in the chat there. There is no show without an audience, right? So, because, Steve and Don and I, we can get together and we can talk about photographs all day long, and we do. We love to do that. But having you all here watching and getting involved and making your own comments is really what it's all about. We hope you've loved the selection we made, and we hope you've enjoyed the comments. As we mentioned earlier, there is no right or wrong. We're not looking for the best or the worst. We're looking to critique these images in a way that helps elevate all of us, and rising tide lifts all ships, as they say. Steve, thank you so much. Where can people find out more? We've spoke about various things that you do, but where can people go to find out more about yourself?
Everything is at either the podcast website, which is behindtheshot.tv, or my personal website, which is stevebrazill.com. It's like the country Brazil, but 2 L's. And again, I just want to reiterate, thank you to Flickr and SmugMug and Alastair for having Don and I to do the critique show. We do monthly on SmugMug Live this month, but normally the critique shows, we run them through the Behind the Shot Flickr group. So go join the group, submit your images, make sure if you want your image considered for, we only do 9 each time, but if you want it considered for the critique shows, do a Flickr tag of BTSCritique, all one word, and then subscribe to the Behind the Shot YouTube channel, because that's where the critique shows normally go. The podcast is in a normal podcast feed, but the critique shows are only on the Behind the Shot YouTube channel.
Wonderful. And Don, where can people go to find out a little bit more about yourself?
Well, you can just look up Photo Geek Weekly, and I'm sure you'll find your way to the podcast. But you can go to my personal portfolio website, which has all of my links to social media, and you can follow all of my latest musings, and that is at donkom.ca, donkom.ca, and links to my book and everything else you can find there as well. Be looking forward to talking more about photography, about critiques with anybody that watches this. As you said, Alastair, we talk about this stuff all the time. We love it. And so keep that conversation going. Please get in touch with me if you have any comments or questions. Follow us on social media. Keep the conversation going, because it's one that we never want to stop.
Absolutely. And there really is no better place to have that conversation, in my opinion, than Flickr. So go sign up to Flickr if you aren't already there. If you are, get into the Behind the Shot Flickr group and leave your comments, get involved with all those thousands of images that we weren't able to pick today. Those people would still love to hear your comments on their images, and get your own images up there. I would ask you to do one other thing for me. I would ask you to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification here on YouTube. That way you will be notified whenever we do another show here. We typically do a show a week. We don't have a show next week. I have some other commitments next week, so there's no show next week, so I'm having a little bit of break for a week. However, you asked for more photo critiques, so we're going to try and do hopefully one a quarter, and we're always looking for other people, other communities who maybe do critique shows as well to get in touch, and maybe we can partner up and cross streams with other people. But today was all about crossing streams with Behind the Shot. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a blast as always. I think the biggest thank you, though, has to go to the people who took the effort to submit their images and tag them with BTSCritique. Without you doing that, there wouldn't have been a show even for the audience. So it's something very special to be allowed to critique someone's images, and thank you for allowing us to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, very definitely. To everybody, Kathy actually just said the same thing in the chat. And to everybody that's joined the group, we've got a lot of new followers in the Behind the Shot group. Thank you for all the comments and the participation in the community part of the group. Yeah, it's photography, but the nice thing about Flickr is there's also the community part with the discussions. So to everybody participating in there, thank you as well. Yeah, thank you to all the wonderful comments. Right, that's been a long show. It's time to stop doing this, but you two have another show to do. So I'm going to start my weekend right here. Wherever you are in the world watching this, as always, stay safe, be kind, look after each other, and we'll see you back here for another episode of SmugMug Live and Behind the Shot very soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.